The thunder crashed like a war drum across the village as Maya's bleeding hands scrubbed clothes in the muddy rainwater. At 15, she had known nothing but servitude since the death of the only parents she'd ever remembered. Her knuckles were raw from the harsh soap, her thin frame shivering in the pre-dawn cold, but she dared not stop. Aunt Rita would be out soon, and Maya had learned that being behind schedule meant more than harsh words. The door burst open with a violent bang. Aunt Rita, 45 and hardened by years of bitterness, stormed into the compound like a hurricane. Her eyes, always cold when they fell on Maya, blazed with fresh fury. "You lazy witch!" she screamed, grabbing Maya by her hair with brutal force. "The sun isn't even up and you're already behind." Before Maya could protest, Aunt Rita shoved her face first into the muddy water. Maya gasped and choked, tasting dirt and soap, her lungs burning as she struggled to breathe. "Please, Aunt Rita," Maya gasped when she finally surfaced. "I was just what? Making excuses like your worthless mother?" The words hit Maya harder than any physical blow. Her eyes flashed with a pain that ran deeper than her raw hands or aching back. "My mother wasn't worthless," Maya said quietly, but with a defiance that surprised them both. The slap came swift and hard, echoing across the compound like a gunshot. Maya's cheek burned, but something inside her refused to break completely. "Don't you dare talk back to me," Aunt Rita snarled. Maya stumbled into the house, her face already swelling from the blow. In the living room, her cousin Daniel lounged on the threadbare couch, scrolling through his phone with the casual indifference of someone who had never known a day of real work. At 20, he had perfected the art of laziness, spending his days in idleness, while Maya carried the weight of the household. "Morning, servant girl," he said without looking up. "My breakfast better be ready in 10 minutes. Maya moved toward the kitchen, her body aching from the morning's abuse. As she passed, Daniel deliberately stuck out his foot. She tripped, scattering the freshly washed clothes across the dirty floor. "Clumsy too," Daniel laughed. "Just like I'll tell everyone when they ask why I failed my exams." Maya's blood turned to ice. Something in his tone, the cruel satisfaction in his voice, sent warning signals through her exhausted mind. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Daniel's smirk widened like a predator, sensing fear. "You've been distracting me, cousin. Coming to my room at night, begging for attention." "That's a lie." Maya backed away, horror washing over her face. "I've never—" "Who are they going to believe?" Daniel interrupted, his voice dripping with malice. "The successful son or the orphan burden?" Maya felt the walls closing in around her. In that moment, she understood that her cousin had just signed her death warrant with his lies. An hour later, Aunt Rita dragged Maya into the compound by her arm, her voice carrying across the village like a town crier announcing scandal. "Come see what the snake has done," she shouted to the gathering neighbors. Seducing her own cousin, the crowd materialized as if summoned by the promise of drama. Faces Maya had known her entire life, people she had greeted every morning while sweeping their doorsteps, now looked at her with disgust and judgment. "It's not true!" Maya's voice cracked with desperation. "Please, someone believe me." Uncle Kwame emerged from the house, but when Maya's pleading eyes met his, he looked away and walked back inside without a word. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. "Shame," called out Mrs. Adazy from the crowd, and we took pity on her. Daniel appeared, manufactured tears glistening in his eyes. "I tried to resist," he said, his voice breaking with false emotion, "but she kept coming to my room. I couldn't sleep." Maya fell to her knees in the dirt, the weight of the lies crushing her spirit. "Uncle Kwame, you know me. You know I would never." But Uncle Kwame had already disappeared into the house, abandoning her to the mob's judgment. "Enough!" Aunt Rita's voice cut through the murmurs. "I've found a solution. a husband willing to take this disgrace off her hands. From the edge of the crowd stepped an elderly man. Papa Stone was hunched with age, leaning heavily on a walking stick, his clothes patched and worn. He looked to be in his 70s, with kind eyes that seemed oddly out of place given the circumstances. "Is she healthy?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible above the crowd's murmurs. "Healthy enough for what you need her for," Aunt Rita replied with cruel satisfaction. Laughter erupted from the gathered villagers. Maya tried to run, but rough hands grabbed her arms. "Please," she screamed. "I don't know him. I'm just a child." "You should have thought of that before acting like a woman," Aunt Rita spat. A bag containing Maya's few belongings was thrown at her feet like scraps to a dog. The fabric was old and torn, stuffed hastily with the remnants of a life that was being erased. "Take your rags and go," Aunt Rita commanded. "Never come back." Maya picked up her bag with trembling hands, tears streaming down her swollen face. Papa Stone turned and began walking toward the village edge. Maya had no choice but to follow, leaving behind the only home she had ever known. They walked in silence for hours through winding forest paths Maya had never seen. Papa Stone moved slowly but steadily, his walking stick tapping against the hard earth like a metronome counting down to an uncertain future. Maya's feet, accustomed only to the familiar ground of her village, began to blister in her worn shoes. As evening approached, they arrived at a small abandoned hut on the outskirts of a neighboring village. From the outside, it looked forgotten by time, with a roof patched with leaves and walls cracked in several places. "We rest here tonight," Papa Stone said, his voice gentle. "Tomorrow, the city." Maya's eyes widened. City. She had never been beyond her village borders, and the word filled her with equal parts fear and curiosity. Back in their room, Maya sat by the window, her legs still shaking from the encounter. Papa Stone sat beside her, and for the first time since they'd met, he spoke more than a few words. "You need to know the truth," he said, his voice carrying a weight that made Maya look up sharply. He reached into his bag and withdrew a manila file, thick with documents and photographs. From within, he pulled out a picture, faded and torn at the edges, of a baby girl with large, curious eyes and curly hair. Maya gasped. She had seen this picture before, tucked away in one of her late mother's belongings. Mama Rose had told her it was from the day they first brought her home. "That's me," Maya whispered. Papa Stone nodded slowly. "Maya, your real name is Zara Adebayo. You are the daughter of Chief Marcus Adebayo, one of Nigeria's wealthiest men." The room seemed to spin around Maya. "What?" "You were kidnapped as a toddler shortly after your mother died. The case went cold, but new information led me to your village. Your photo, certain details, hospital records, everything matched." Maya shook her head violently, standing up so quickly she knocked over her water cup. No, that's not true. My father is Papa John. My mother was Mama Rose. They loved me. We were poor, but I never felt unloved." Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the photograph. "They taught me dignity. They showed me kindness. My parents were good people." Papa Stone, or whoever he really was, watched her with steady, compassionate eyes. No pity, no pressure, just patient understanding. "Your unknown parents," Maya whispered suddenly, remembering Aunt Rita's cruel words. The insult had always puzzled her, but now it made terrible sense. She knew. Somehow she knew. The truth crashed over her like a wave. Her entire life had been built on a foundation of lies and secrets. The loving parents who raised her, the relatives who tormented her, the village that rejected her, none of it was what it seemed. "What now?" Maya asked, her voice barely audible. "Now," he said gently, "we go meet your real father. But first, you should know, my name is Detective Sam Okoro. I've been searching for you for 3 years." The journey to Lagos felt like traveling to another planet. Maya pressed her face against the window of the luxury car that had met them at the bus station, watching the landscape transform from rural villages to sprawling urban sprawl. Buildings rose higher than anything she had ever imagined, touching the sky like concrete mountains. Cars moved in endless streams, their lights creating rivers of gold and red in the darkness. The gates of the Adebayo mansion opened slowly, revealing a world that belonged in fairy tales. Maya stepped out of the car on unsteady legs, overwhelmed by the grandeur. The house was massive, all white walls and gleaming glass, with a fountain dancing in the center of a perfectly manicured garden. Flowers were arranged with artistic precision, and the grass looked soft enough to sleep on. Inside, everything gleamed with wealth. The marble floors reflected her image like mirrors, and the walls were covered with photographs of a distinguished man in expensive suits, shaking hands with presidents and governors. That man now stood before her. Chief Marcus Adebayo was tall and imposing in his perfectly tailored clothing, but his eyes, Maya's eyes, were soft with emotion. They stared at each other across an impossible gulf of years and circumstances. "My daughter," he whispered, taking a tentative step forward. Before either could speak further, the sound of high heels clicked across the marble floor. A beautiful woman entered the room, draped in gold and red lace that probably cost more than Maya's entire village saw in a year. Her face was a mask of controlled displeasure. "Raymond," she said, her voice sharp as glass, "who is this?" "Gloria," Chief Marcus replied softly. "This is Zara, my daughter." Gloria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Daughter? From where?" "The one I've been searching for all these years." Detective Okoro stepped forward. "The DNA test is already arranged, ma'am. We'll have confirmation within days." Gloria didn't smile. She didn't welcome Maya. Instead, she turned away as if Maya were something unpleasant that had been tracked in on someone's shoes. Later that evening, as Maya sat in the guest room she'd been assigned, larger than the entire house she'd grown up in, another young woman entered without knocking. She was about Maya's age, with a kind of polished beauty that came from expensive schools and exclusive salons. "So," the girl said, folding her manicured arms, "you're the bush girl they brought here." Maya said nothing, instinctively recognizing a predator. "Let me make something clear," the girl continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm Peace. This is my house, my family, and I don't share." She turned and left without another word, leaving Maya alone with the crushing realization that wealth didn't necessarily mean welcome. 2 days later, the DNA results confirmed what Detective Okoro had suspected. Maya was indeed Zara Adebayo, Chief Marcus's long-lost daughter. The news spread through the household like wildfire, but instead of celebration, Maya felt the temperature in the mansion drop several degrees. That night, she overheard Gloria and Peace talking behind closed doors. "Now she's here. What next?" Gloria's voice carried clearly through the thin walls. "You know what this means for Peace's inheritance, Marcus." Maya pressed her hand to her mouth, her chest tightening with understanding. To them, she wasn't a daughter or sister returning home. She was a threat, an intruder who had come to steal what they believed was rightfully theirs. The days that followed were a masterclass in subtle cruelty. Gloria would speak to Maya only when necessary, her words polite but cold enough to freeze blood. Peace laughed behind Maya's back, calling her Project Child and Charity Case when she thought Maya couldn't hear. Even the household staff whispered when she passed, their eyes filled with curiosity and judgment. Maya sat in her luxurious room, surrounded by comfort she had never dreamed of, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. She held Mama Rose's old wrapper, the only thing she had brought from her past, and wept for the simple love she had lost. One evening, Chief Marcus found her sitting in the garden, staring at the fountain with empty eyes. "I thought finding my real family would fix everything," Maya said without looking up. "But I just traded one kind of rejection for another." Chief Marcus sat beside her, his expensive suit incongruous against the garden bench. "I know this is difficult. Gloria and Peace, they need time to adjust." "Do they?" Maya asked, finally meeting his eyes. "Or do they just need me to disappear?" The pain in her voice cut through his heart. "You're my daughter, Zara. My blood. Nothing will change that." "Blood doesn't always mean family," Maya replied quietly. "Mama Rose and Papa John taught me that. They weren't my blood, but they were my family. They saw me as precious, not as competition." Chief Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "What can I do to make this right?" Maya looked up at him, and for the first time since arriving, her eyes held something other than sadness. They held determination. "I want to go back to the village," she said. "What for?" Maya's voice grew stronger with each word. "I want to show them exactly who they sold, and I want to make sure no other girl ever goes through what I did." Chief Marcus studied his daughter's face, seeing something there that reminded him of himself at her age, the fire that had built his empire from nothing. "What did you have in mind?" Maya straightened, her voice gaining confidence. "I want to buy the compound where I lived, and I want to build a school there for orphaned girls. Girls like me, who have nowhere to go and no one to protect them." "That's a significant undertaking," Chief Marcus said carefully. Maya looked at him directly, her chin raised with newfound pride. "I'm a significant person now, aren't I?" For the first time since her arrival, Chief Marcus smiled with genuine warmth. "Yes," he said, "yes, you are." 1 month later, construction crews swarmed the compound, where Maya had once scrubbed clothes in the mud. The sound of hammers and machinery filled the air as a beautiful school building rose from the ground. A large sign at the entrance read, Rose and John Memorial School for Girls, founded by Zara Adebayo. The luxury car that pulled up to the construction site drew curious stares from the gathered villagers. When Maya stepped out, transformed into a confident young woman in elegant clothing, gasps rippled through the crowd. Maya? Aunt Rita's voice cracked with disbelief. What? How? Maya walked toward the woman who had tormented her, her head held high. My name is Zara Adebayo, Chief Marcus Adebayo's daughter, the one you sold to an old man for a few thousand naira. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Daniel pushed forward, his face pale with growing understanding. That's impossible, he stammered. Maya's smile was cold as winter morning. Is it? You said I was seducing you, Daniel. Funny thing about lies, they have a way of catching up to you. She nodded to Detective Okoro, who appeared in full police uniform with several officers behind him. Daniel Okoro, Detective Okoro, announced formally, You're under arrest for false accusation and child endangerment. Wait! Daniel's voice rose to a panicked pitch. It wasn't! I didn't know! Maya turned to Aunt Rita, who had fallen to her knees in the dust. And you, child trafficking carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. Please, Maya. Zara, we didn't know who you were. You knew I was innocent, Maya replied, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. You knew I was just a child with no one to protect her, but you chose cruelty over compassion. She walked to the center of the compound, addressing the entire village that had gathered to witness this impossible reversal of fortune. This school will house 50 girls, Maya announced, her voice strong and clear. Girls with no families, no protection. Girls who sleep on the ground and beg for scraps. Girls who are blamed for crimes they didn't commit and sold like cattle when they become inconvenient. Her voice grew emotional, but remained steady. Every single one of them will know they are valuable, worthy, and loved. They'll receive education, vocational training, and most importantly, dignity. Many of the villagers began to cry, overwhelmed by shame for their complicity in her suffering. You all watched, Maya continued, her eyes sweeping across the faces of people who had known her since childhood. You all stayed silent when I needed just one voice to speak for me. But these girls won't have to depend on your kindness. They'll have mine. Uncle Kwame stepped forward from the crowd, his face aged beyond his years with regret. Maya, Zara, I'm sorry. I was a coward. Maya looked at the man who had been her father's brother, the man who had turned away when she needed him most. Yes, she said simply. You were. But today is not about the past. It's about making sure the future looks different. 1 year later, the Rose and John Memorial School stood as a testament to transformation. The compound that had once echoed with Maya's cries now rang with the laughter of young girls who had been given a second chance at life. On graduation day, Maya stood before a crowd that included her father, government officials, and media representatives. At 17, she had become one of Nigeria's youngest philanthropists, her story inspiring a national conversation about child protection and education. A wise woman once told me, Maya said into the microphone, her voice carrying across the packed courtyard, you are my child, and that makes you precious. Today, I say the same to every girl who thinks the world has forgotten her. In the audience, she spotted Uncle Kwame, now working as a security guard at the school, a job she had offered him not out of forgiveness, but out of understanding that redemption required opportunity. You are seen, Maya continued, her eyes finding the faces of the graduating girls. You are valued. You are worthy of every dream you dare to dream. Thunderous applause erupted from the crowd. Among the graduates, a small girl who looked remarkably like Maya at that age raised her hand eagerly. Miss Zara, she called out, When I grow up, I want to build schools too. Maya's eyes filled with tears of joy. Then you will. Beautiful girl. Then you will. As the ceremony concluded and families celebrated their daughter's achievements, Maya stood quietly in the garden that had once been Aunt Rita's compound. Detective Okoro approached, now a close family friend and board member of her foundation. "Any regrets?" he asked. Maya shook her head, watching the children play where she had once scrubbed clothes in muddy water. "How can I regret a journey that led me here? Every betrayal, every lie, every moment of pain. It all brought me to this purpose." She paused, her hand resting on the memorial plaque dedicated to Mama Rose and Papa John, the couple who had loved her without knowing her true identity, who had shown her what family really meant. "I used to think I was lost," Maya said softly, "but I was never lost. I was just becoming who I was meant to be." The sun set over the school that had risen from the ashes of Maya's childhood pain, casting golden light over a new generation of girls who would never have to wonder if they were precious. They would know, because someone who had walked their path would spend her life making sure they never forgot. Maya Adebayo, born Zara, raised in love, forged in fire, and returned in strength, had discovered that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the deepest wounds. Her story became legend, but more importantly, it became hope for every forgotten child who dared to believe they were worth more than the world's indifference. In the years that followed, the Rose and John Memorial Foundation grew to operate 12 schools across Nigeria, educating over 2,000 girls who might otherwise have been forgotten. Maya's story was told in books and documentaries, inspiring legislation to protect orphaned children and hold accountable those who would exploit them. But for Maya herself, the greatest victory wasn't in the awards or recognition. It was in the laughter that now filled the spaces where tears had once fallen, and in the knowledge that no girl would ever again have to sleep on the ground while the world turned away. She had learned the most powerful lesson of all, that sometimes we must lose everything to discover who we truly are, and that our greatest pain can become our most powerful purpose.